Hello and welcome to this presentation on pilgrimage and specifically the Camino de Santiago. I decided to do a dedicated recording of the talk that I gave yesterday at St. Matt's. This will allow me to eliminate some of the distraction that may not have made any sense to all of you who are watching on video. And it'll also allow me to point to what I'm talking about by using the cursor on my computer. So I think that both of those things will enable you to have a better viewing experience. And as always, I'm anxious to answer any questions and just share my experiences in more detail if you're interested. So I'm going to share my screen. And we will begin. Here we go. So Salvator ambulando is a term that was first used by St. Augustine of Hippo, and this essentially means that there are things that can be worked out in one's mind by using one's body, by walking, by incorporating that physical aspect of movement while contemplating spiritual, intellectual life issues. And pilgrimage lends itself very well to this kind of concept of it is solved by walking. And I want to talk a little bit more about just what a pilgrimage is and what makes it unique in terms of its ability to focus one's attention and energies. So a pilgrimage is basically described as a meaningful journey to a sacred place. And what's sacred is sacred to you as an individual. And in religious context, we think of the shrines of saints or holy places where miracles have happened. But sacred places to an individual can be a place in nature. It can be architecture because it inspires a sense of awe and wonder about how that was created and how it was done. It's very dependent on your individual sense of wonder. So this lends itself to the concept of pilgrimage doesn't necessarily require traveling long distances to a special place. Pilgrimage, depending on your physical abilities, can happen in your neighborhood or in your community, much closer to home than what I'm going to talk about specifically here. So but I want to begin with, so sorry about that. Maybe it'd be best to mute my phone. I want to start with the prayer for pilgrims. And I traveled with to the Camino de Santiago on 2 occasions with groups from the Diocese of Colorado. And although this prayer, I've used it ever since I started seminary. And got on this path to spiritual leadership because I think it's so appropriate in so many cases, but it is especially appropriate for pilgrims. So let us pray. My Lord God, I have no idea where I am going. I do not see the road ahead of me. I cannot know for certain where it will end, nor do I really know myself. And the fact that I think I am following your will does not mean that I am actually doing so. But I believe that the desire to please you does in fact please you. And I hope that I will never do anything apart from that desire. And I know that if I do this, you will lead me by the right road, though I may know nothing about it. Therefore, I will trust you always, though I may seem to be lost and in the shadow of death. I will not fear, for you are ever with me, and you will never leave me to face my struggles alone. Amen. So let's talk about the difference between being a pilgrim and being a tourist. And this is not to say that one is better than the other. These are both valuable activities, but they're different. And I travel as I'm going to Europe in a few weeks to travel as a tourist. But I also love traveling as a pilgrim. So here's the difference. A pilgrimage is very intent on embracing all of the experience that comes with this journey, whatever those experiences are. And it's a mindset that one cultivates before stepping out of the door on your pilgrim journey, that this is all part of discovery about myself, about where I am, and about what I can learn. When I travel as a tourist, I'm trying to plan this thing to as much as I can because I'm a planner, or I'm doing whatever makes me comfortable in terms of preparation to avoid the unpleasant or the difficult. And we also do that when we plan a pilgrimage, but we do not step back from avoiding what is difficult if it has the potential of being a meaningful experience. And just the example of why would anyone choose to walk 18 miles in one day as a tourist? But as a pilgrim, it imposes that physical challenge that reveals things about yourself and about others as well. So pilgrimage requires a mindful presence, that you are attentive at as much as possible. I mean, we all wander, and I don't want this to sound like it's over disciplined, but it is highly disciplined in terms of pilgrimage. And we stress, as in preparing our pilgrims for the Camino, that being mindfully present is an essential part of getting the most out of your Camino. Seeing things for the fun of it is a mark of tourism. I'm going someplace I've never been before this month, and I'm looking forward to that just for the fun of it, and to see what new experiences I can enjoy there. I'm not going necessarily with the purpose of desire for growth, insight, meaning, or truth, but those are things that I thought about ahead of time before I started on this pilgrimage. And what was it I wanted to get out of this? I don't think you ever know for sure what your Camino is going to provide for you and what you're going to learn. And a lot of it even happens after you get home. But there's a purpose, an intent there. As a tourist, I'm going with a group. I'm going to follow the itinerary of the group. We'll see these things on these days. And I pretty much expect that schedule, with reason, is going to be what I will experience. And in a pilgrimage, it's a time of discovery. You don't know how you're going to react to the stresses of pilgrimage, to the wonder of the sunrise. And I have surprised myself frequently when on pilgrimage, in terms of what actually pops out to me and what becomes very meaningful. A pilgrimage has intentional inner preparation with a spiritual component before you even set out. With the diocesan program in Colorado, we work with our pilgrims for months ahead of time in terms of getting them focused on their physical, their mental, and their spiritual readiness for a Camino. And we bring the group together at Cathedral Ridge before we actually get to our starting point on the Camino, for a weekend of getting to know each other and exploring what we all are thinking about the Camino, how is it going with our preparation. We do some hikes, and it's a very essential part of the participation in the Camino. And our pilgrims have said consistently that retreat at Cathedral Ridge was added a great deal of meaning, because we stepped off the plane in Spain already knowing each other, and it was very helpful. In a pilgrimage, there's also the expectation of the sacred. And I talked about that a bit earlier, in that it's essential that we look at and be conscious of the sacredness of creation, of one another, of what we are encountering, and to be open to how those things are going to speak to us in this setting. So this is a map of Europe, obviously, and I will use my pointer here. Right here, bottom left side in the middle is Santiago de Compostela, which is the tomb of St. James at the cathedral in Santiago, Spain. And all of these lines on this map are pilgrim routes. The primary route is this red line here, but we had people on our trip in 2019 who had visited family in Germany and saw this symbol of the Camino, the scallop shell, on the pavement or on fences, that pilgrim, the Camino de Santiago includes all of these routes from all over Europe and Great Britain. In traditional terms, a pilgrimage begins from home, and people would begin their pilgrimage as they stepped out the door. They would just start from home, however far away that was from the site they were traveling to. This is, let me go back one. The cathedral in Santiago. So this is the pilgrimage destination. I have no idea how they got this picture with this plaza so empty, because it is traditionally just filled with people. We were there in May on the Feast of the Ascension, and the place was packed. There were 13,000 pilgrims in Santiago that day, on Ascension Day. And I'll tell you more about the numbers that travel the Camino and how that has progressed over the years. This is our group when we arrived at the cathedral. And again, that plaza looks fairly empty. This was a very, very lucky shot that we didn't get a bunch of people in the background, because it was quite populated that day. Yesterday, some people asked me about hiking poles, and did I use hiking poles? And yes, I've become a great believer in hiking poles. I never used them before my first Camino, but found them very helpful for balance and for navigating difficult terrain, and just for propulsion in going uphill especially. So yeah, I'm a believer in hiking poles now. This is the tomb of St. James that lies under the cathedral, and it is believed that the remains of St. James the Apostle are in this tomb. And it was, the remains were discovered, let's see, in the 9th century. And the pilgrimage route was actually established to Santiago in the 10th century. It became an official pilgrimage route for the Roman Catholic Church in the 15th century, along with pilgrimage routes to Rome and Jerusalem as the 3 primary pilgrim routes in Catholicism. These days, people walk the Camino or ride bicycles for all sorts of reasons. Most people, I believe the statistics show that they do come for a spiritual or religious reason. Some because it's on their bucket list and they want to walk the Camino. So you meet all sorts of folks along the way that are there, who are there for all sorts of reasons. This is when I was in Santiago de Compostela in 2019. And down here in the bottom center, you'll see the statue of St. James, and see those arms around there? That's me. And this was a traditional ritual that one would do when you finished your Camino and got to the cathedral, that you would take the opportunity to give St. James a hug. There's a little stairway and walkway behind the statue. This is at the high altar. And give St. James a hug and thanksgiving for a safe journey and for the blessings of being a pilgrim. The other thing I would have you note about this picture is how dirty everything is up here. See how that grayish dust, that is all dust. Now, if we fast forward to 2022, it has been totally cleaned and restored. It was the entire cathedral went through a massive restoration in 2018, 19 to get it, and 20 to get it ready for the holy year, to get ready for the holy year of 2021. And then everything shut down because of the pandemic. So they moved the holy year is whenever the Feast of St. James occurs on a Sunday. And it's so it's not on a regular schedule. It's not every 8 years or 6 years. It depends on the calendar. But anyway, they did a massive restoration job on this, and you can see what a dramatic effect. Now, this year, you cannot walk up to St. James here and hug him from behind because of COVID, but he's there in all his glory. Here's what's happened with the Camino over the years. So this is the number of pilgrims registered from 2010 to 2021, and 2010 was a holy year. So there were over 250,000 pilgrims registered for that year, and it's gradually increased from 2011 back up to exceeding that number in 2019. Everything dropped off in 2020. Started coming back a little bit in 2021, and this year, the last 100 kilometers of the pilgrimage was, I won't say packed, but there were a lot of people there. And like I said, the day we arrived in Santiago, we were among over 10,000 pilgrims who arrived in the city that day. So it is definitely making a comeback. And I think it's another indicator or example of the pent up need and demand that has been from the pandemic. People are just anxious to get out and do things. And this, after emerging from 2 years of restrictions, this is a great way to stretch your legs. So this slide shows the route that we took, that I took this year with the pilgrims from the diocese. We started in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port in France, went up and over the Pyrenees the first day, and then we sort of hopscotched along the black line I put in here, using a bus, and I'll show you some pictures of these things and which pieces of the route we did do, until we got within 65 miles of Santiago. And from that point, which is right about in here, it's right about in here, we walked continuously day by day. So we walked from one hotel to the next and did not use any kind of other transportation except ourselves. We did have a car. Our local guide had a car, and there were some folks who couldn't do the whole walk each day, and she would take them further up the route and drop them off so they could do a portion of the route if they were not able to do the whole 18 miles was our longest day. 6 miles was our shortest day, but the average was about 14. And we ended up here in Santiago de Compostela. In 2019 and in 2023, the diocesan route will be on the Portuguese way, this red line here. And we will probably do maybe from Porto on up in 23. But we will also be picking up gems, the sites that are really kind of special about this route. And I'll explain more about how we design these trips as we get a little bit further along. So this is where we started our pilgrimage this year. This is Lourdes, and the famous site, the healing waters of Lourdes, discovered by Saint Bernadette. And the font, or the spring of healing water, is underneath this big building here, the church. It is a magnificent building, and just this picture of it just kind of captures it's very lush. And the day we were there, it was full of military because it was military pilgrimage weekend. I show you this picture of Lourdes because it's a piece of how our pilgrimages for the diocese are structured. We don't just bring everybody to Spain or France and start walking the Camino de Santiago the next day. We begin by taking a couple days at a holy site, and kind of get acclimated to the time, rest up from the travel, take in the experience of being in one of these famous pilgrimage sites that has so much meaning for so many people. So this year we went to Lourdes. In 2019, we went to Fatima, another place of the appearance of the Virgin Mary in Fatima. It was to children. It was we did not go to Mass in Lourdes because there were so many people there. We didn't want to expose this group at the very beginning of our trip, especially to the possibility of exposure to COVID. So we walked the Stations of the Cross at Lourdes, and you can see that it's a very rich kind of imagery and how do I want us to describe it? That we're not looking at pictures on a wall here. We're looking at these beautiful scenes set into nature, and it spread out along the hillside up above the basilica there in Lourdes. So it was a wonderful kind of spiritual experience that sort of got us centered, and then we were on our way to begin walking the Camino. We spent 2 nights in Lourdes. This is not Lourdes, this is Fatima, where I was in 2019, but we experienced the same thing in Lourdes. I just couldn't get a good picture of it. So this is a picture of the candlelight procession at Fatima. The thing that was so incredibly impressive to me in this was the story that every individual we see in these places and in these vigils has a story, and they're all there for a reason, and they've come to this place for a reason. Many for healing, for blessings, for peace, and candles are a big part of this. And there's all kinds of little stores around the basilicas, the cathedral, where candles are sold, and it's a big piece of the symbolism that goes on here. And this is that same candlelight vigil. They process the statue of the Virgin Mary through the plaza there. And there were just thousands and thousands of people there. And this was low season in Fatima. So this is our pilgrim group. The only person here is the person taking the picture, and that was Canon Greg Foraker from the Office of the Bishop. And we have people from Breckenridge and from Colorado Springs, from the Front Range, 2 people from Arizona who heard about this and knew Greg and wanted to come along. It was great having them with us. And then one person, this guy standing next to me, I'm here on the right, and staying next to me is a priest from Navajo land. So we had a really nice diversity in our group. The youngest person here was 48, I believe, and the oldest was 80. I won't tell you who's who. This is me celebrating the Eucharist in Saint Jean Pied de Port before the evening before we were going to set out walking the next day. And you use what you have available, and I celebrated the Eucharist with a croissant and wine in an egg cup, because that was what we had to use. We got very creative because we didn't want to carry things with us on this, and people said it was the best tasting communion they'd ever had. So it was, and of course, for me, it was a very special privilege to celebrate Eucharist on the pilgrimage. This is my pack ready for the first day of walking. The first day was going to be 16 miles, 4,000 feet of elevation gain. And I was ready. I had my baguette, cheese and fruit, in my pack, lots of water, electrolytes, foot care items for first aid, rain gear, and that was probably sunglasses, sunscreen. That's about it. But I got that baguette. I love this story because this baguette I purchased at a little kiosk. It was just like an ATM in a wall in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. Put in €1 and out popped this baguette right out of the wall. It was great. This was the first morning of walking, and we started out in the dark, 5:30. It was pitch dark. We had to use headlamps to find our way. And then the sun started to come up, and it was magnificent. And someone asked me yesterday if these were my pictures. They are, and there are a few in here that are not my own photos, but this one is, and most of the landscape pictures are, and taken with my iPhone. That's all I used. So, and it was just absolutely stunning. I can't remember seeing such beauty in nature, and I'm sure it was part of that where I was in my own headspace, and this day that was going to be so challenging with so many miles and so much elevation, but to dawn in this way was absolutely inspiring. This road may look like it's going downhill, but I guarantee you it's at best flat. But going over the Pyrenees was just a great experience. We saw horses and sheep and cattle and grazing, and it was and it was just a beautiful day. It was a marvel of nature. We had a lot of wind part of the day, which was a little annoying for some, but overall it was just spectacular. This bottom left picture is one of the it's like a canteen. It's also an albergue, but this is a place for pilgrims to stop for refreshments and also to spend the night. And so the typical accommodations for pilgrims on the Camino de Santiago is an albergue, which is a dormitory style room, big rooms, lots of bunk beds, shared bathroom facilities. Most of them don't have hot water. I believe that is still the case. And it is if you've watched the movie The Way with Martin Sheen, they stay in albergues. We stayed in hotels. So that's another thing to know about if you go on a pilgrimage with the diocese, that we stay in hotels with our own bathrooms. And yeah, it's way more comfortable than these spots. But if you want the true pilgrim experiences, these are the kind of places you stay in. This one's not my picture, but it is Roncesvalles, Spain. So we started out in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. We ended the day we started in France, we ended in Spain, went over the border into to Spain that first day of walking. And this chapel, this church has been here, as you can see, for a very long time. And every day at 6 o'clock, there is a pilgrim's mass. It's all in Spanish, but you get the idea. And there's a blessing of the pilgrims. So this is a very iconic experience on the Camino de Santiago, is to attend the pilgrim's mass in Roncesvalles right here. So the next day we set out walking again. Santiago, from this point, 790 kilometers, about 500 miles from here if you walk the Camino path, it's about 500 miles from this point. And we obviously did not walk all of that, but we were a hardy group and excited for the day when we set out. So here is sort of a graph of the elevation gains and distances. The distances are not in proportion here, but you can see kind of the elevation that the Camino includes. So way over here on the right-hand side, Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, this is that first day I was talking about when we went up and over the Pyrenees to Roncesvalles. And then if you look down here at these lines, these dark red lines, these are the portions that we walked. And the goal was to have the pilgrims experience samples of the most iconic experiences on the Camino. So we did these sections, and in between here, we would take a bus, and then we skipped this. We actually dipped down and just south off of the route to visit a cathedral and stay in a convent that had been converted. And the place we stayed, and the name is going to escape me now, but it's the monks that recorded the CD chant. So we went to evening prayer there and got to hear their incredible chanting at evening prayer. So, and then we picked up these experiences, and I'll show you pictures of some of these. And then this is the section we did continuously. In order to get your certificate of completion of the Camino de Santiago, one must walk the last 100 kilometers. So there are a lot more people here on this portion of the road over here on the left. My favorite sign from the Camino, you can figure out what that means. And the wayfinding on the Camino de Santiago is the scallop shell. And there is folklore about why the scallop shell, and we can, I'll probably talk about that next time. But these blue and yellow signs are how you find your way. I found the route we did this year, the Camino Frances, wayfinding to be very simple. It was very, very well marked. The Portuguese route, not so much. But I had an app on my phone that would keep me on track. If I hadn't seen a scallop shell for a while, I could pull up my app. And after I did that for about the third time in one day, I thought, people have been walking this route for 1,000 years, and they didn't always have iPhone apps. So I think I need to pay more attention to what I'm doing. But you just get kind of lost in the beauty or the interest. This is bottom right is a cemetery. And this is very, very early in the morning and in the rain. And then you run into things like here at the bottom left, where you got an arrow pointing to the left and one to the right. And so we had maps with us, as paper maps that were helpful, that we were given each day before our walk. This is part of, actually headed up to Alto de Perdón. We're headed up, we're going to be walking up this trail that comes up to this ridge right here on the skyline there. And the poppies were absolutely beautiful. It was a glorious day, again, very warm. We had really, really warm weather for the first 5 days, and then really rainy weather for the second 5 that we were walking. Some of our pilgrims, this guy on the right wasn't part of our group, and I didn't take this picture because of it, but I think he looks like Father Steve. But these other 3 people are part of our group. This vending machine, and you can probably see it on the screen. I don't think our folks could see it yesterday. This is all foot care products. There's not a snack in this vending machine, but everything is for blisters or rashes or whatever you might need, but all in a vending machine at a little roadside stop on the Camino. Old Roman bridge that we passed by, still in use, still beautifully designed, and just a wonder to think of how old that is. Those of you who know Spanish will understand that this means a fount of wine. And indeed, that is exactly what it was. You could walk up to this place and fill your water bottle with wine. There was nobody checking IDs. There was nothing, no restrictions. It was just, come on and fill your bottle. There was a limited quantity overall that they would put out there every day. There was a winery, but for us from the States, this is the most amazing thing, just to be able to fill a water bottle. And we didn't fill them, by the way. We tasted, and it was not bad wine at all. this is how we traveled from place to place in those first 5 days when we were kind of hopscotching along the Camino. And so it was very comfortable, all masked. Well, we weren't all masked. I didn't know that until this picture came. Some of our folks in the back had not quite following the rules there, but it was a great way to get from one place to another in comfort. And then we would get out and walk the next segment, and the bus would magically meet us at the end of our day's hike. This is part of the Meseta, which is a huge long stretch of the Camino that takes days and days to walk, that is just kind of flat and open and usually very hot. It's a real challenge for pilgrims. We only walked a portion of it, maybe 8 miles, just to have the experience of the Meseta. So one of those gems of the, or it's not really a gem, it's an endurance, but so very, such an essential part of the Camino, because, and I realized it when we were there, that when we've been used to seeing something new each day, to having a very special experience at each place for some reason or another. This is just walking, day after day of walking, until you can get to the other side and into more villages and open places. There are places to stop here, but this, if anything is going to do your feet in, this tends to be the stretch of the Camino that is most difficult, even though there's not a lot of elevation up and down, but it's just a lot of just walking. This is Alto de Perdón. And what this says on this inscription here is where the path of the wind crosses the stars. And Alto de Perdón is the place of forgiveness, the hill of forgiveness. And the tradition is to contemplate that which you need to be forgiven for, and that you need to forgive as you climb up to this point. And you can see this sits high up on that ridge that I showed you a few photos back. This is the entirety of the sculpture. And then the downhill is very steep, even steeper than the uphill, I think, and very difficult. And it's the symbolism there is that both asking for and giving and receiving forgiveness are difficult. They're both challenges, so both the uphill and the downhill. Alto de Perdón. And this is the last slide I have for you. This is Cruz de Ferro, the Iron Cross. Sits high upon this pile of rubble, it looks like. But the tradition here is that you bring a stone from home, carry it with you from home, to bring to this place representing someone or some group or some experience that has been very significant to you in your spiritual development. Some people brought stones with the names of individuals or a relative, and you leave it here because it symbolizes the fact that person, those people, that experience is no longer with you, is not here, and it's a way of kind of, it's paying respect for all that has been given in terms of your own spiritual development, yet letting go of the fact that it's not a part of your life anymore. This was an extremely spiritual and difficult experience for me. I prepared for it. I knew it would be, and it was a good day. And there was having this kind of ritual, personal ritual as a part of the Camino was a very significant experience for me. So that wraps this up for this time. Part 2 will come next week, and I hope you'll be able to join again. And with that, I will sign off for here. Thank you for joining me.